Will de Ligt go to Manchester United? What are Liverpool and Manchester City doing in the transfer market? Why Arteta is looking for a new goalkeeper, plus analysis on Kiernan, Dewsbury-Hall and Archie Gray. Today I'm joined by JJ Bull and Jon Mackenzie to discuss these things. Now, before we begin, let me remind you that the information that we're discussing today, the deals that we're going to talk about today, are reported in The Athletic's DealSheet, which is an absolutely fabulous transfer-related resource. And I read now from the DealSheet, the information found within this article, aka this video, has been gathered according to The Athletic's sourcing guidelines. Unless otherwise stated, our reporters have spoken to more than one person briefed on each deal. So whether or not the moves that we're discussing today do happen or don't happen, they are being discussed. Those elements of it are true. And where else to begin, of course, than with Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, John, who's moved to Chelsea for £30 million from Leicester. The obvious question here is, as Maresca has become Chelsea manager, was Leicester manager before, does Dewsbury-Hall get this move without that relationship?
No, I don't think it would have happened, but I don't think that's necessarily a problem, because I think a lot of managers like to have players with them who are going to follow their tactical instructions, who they know can enact those tactical ideas on the pitch. And obviously that's what's happened last season. Maresca had Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall knows the system. And yeah, the big question then, I think, is whether or not you're going to get the same sort of level of performance in the Premier League from Dewsbury-Hall as you got in the Championship. But Dewsbury-Hall is an interesting player, maybe a bit of a slow developer for someone who's going to be playing in the Premier League next season. In the PL2, you know what the PL2 is?
The PL2, the second PL?
That's right, the second PL. The Premier League 2 is the Premier League for under 23s for the Premier League side. So if you're a really good player, you often don't spend a huge amount of time there. So you'll get maybe 2,000-3,000 minutes. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall has 4,000 minutes, which is about 2 seasons. But usually if you're a really good youth player, you'll either get moved off on loan somewhere to continue your development, or you'll be playing for the first team as well. So I had a look at a few other players, and Tommy Doyle, who's playing at Wolves at the moment, has played a lot of Premier League last season, had around just over 3,000 minutes in
the Man
PL2,
City player, Tommy Doyle.
That's right, yeah. So that suggests that he's a bit of a slow developer. So he's 25 now. So I guess it could be the case that he's actually just making that step upwards now, just a little bit later than most players would. But the big question is whether or not the advantages you get from knowing that the player that you bring with you is going to just be able to enact them on the pitch straight away from Maresca is going to offset maybe a little bit of technical gap between the real top players at the elite sides.
I was a slow developer, and that's why I lost my job at the camera shop. Will he actually play though, JJ, do you think? I mean, is he good enough to get in this team? Because there's a hell of a lot of midfielders already there.
There's an awful lot of players, as you can see. So like John's saying, I think one of the big reasons he's been signed by Maresca is because it's Maresca and he's worked with him before. But one of the advantages Dewsbury-Hall has over these other players is that he is left-footed, and he can play passes with his left foot, which is a big advantage. And you can see this is probably where he'll touch the ball most, around about this middle area here, 18% of this little half space here. Now, playing for Leicester last season, he had 14 goals, 12 assists, or around 12 goals, 14 assists. Really prolific playing for them in that system, so you know it works. A lot of it's box crashing, arriving late in the box to finish off moves, but also a lot of what I really like about him is how he receives the ball in space and turns to set others up. It's all part of how Maresca's team plays. So this is him highlighted in a big circle here. He's been zoomed in on, and what you see is his back to goal, but you see this a lot from highlights of him playing anything that he's involved in. It drops between lines, so he's very hard to pick up, receives it with the back to goal, but he's very aware of what's behind him, so then he receives, he'll instantly turn, have a picture in his mind, knowing that it's going to be outside wingers running in to try and attack the space that's been created. So you'll see he turns on the spot, passes through, and then you get a player coming from out to in to try and finish these moves. Loads and loads of assists that way. We also get him arriving in the box to finish off moves, and that's something that Maresca will have, is those 2-8s will often attack the space, so the wingers will hold with certain points, so that's going to be really useful for him. But as to whether he'll be able to do it in the Premier League, we already know he can, because he's done it before, and it wasn't hugely prolific for one thing. There's a couple of caveats, like he played for a team that was battling relegation, so a very different system as well, so you've got that thing to deal with. But how he then adapts to playing in an attacking team with much better players around him will be very interesting, because as we said, he's not young, he's not like on a development path, he's just the player he is now, but with better people around him.
Well, I can't wait to find out, for one, I am that one. Now, let's move on and discuss Matthijs de Ligt, JJ, because we know that Manchester United are in talks with Bayern Munich over this transfer. It sounds like one that could happen based on the finding some middle ground on a transfer fee there. Why do you think he never lived up to his potential? Because Manchester United specifically have been interested in him his whole career, every time he's moved from Ajax to Juve to Bayern. But I felt as though he was to be a world beater.
He's supposed to be the best ever, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's because he was basically...
Like no one ever was.
Well, like he was the first ever defender to win the Golden Boy Award. So he is the Golden Boy.
Yeah.
And what comes with that is an expectation that suddenly you go on this huge upwards path to becoming a superstar, which is not necessarily what happens. Some players are just born ready, and then they don't really improve.
There's nothing
much.
above gold
Yeah, well,
in the Olympics.
Platinum, maybe.
Can you get a
S?
S?
Like in ranking, you always go like D and then there's S.
Yeah.
He's S.
Diamond.
Diamond. Diamond, yes.
He's a diamond.
Rocket League references, yes.
Yeah.
So De Ligt anyway was meant to be a diamond player.
Yeah.
But he already won the Golden Boy
It's
Award.
actually quite bad at diamond player, but go on. Yeah.
All right, and he was captain of Ajax when he was 19. So a lot of what people were excited about him was that here's essentially a young boy, an adult.
People love it when a young boy is a captain, though. Like Jude Bellingham, it's one of the reasons everyone likes Jude Bellingham, because look how young he is, but look, he's like an adult.
Exactly, he's got maturity, so he's so mature, but De Ligt had that, and he was Ajax captain against teams like Real Madrid. Now, and how you quantify whether he's not fulfilled his potential or not is interesting, because he's only 24 now. He's played for 3 of the biggest clubs in the world. He's won league titles in 3 of the biggest leagues in the world. Well, if you count the Eredivisie, I guess. But what he's also done is his career path has been slightly skewed by going to Juventus quite young. So he was at Ajax doing very well, reached the semi-finals of the Champions League, also played Man United in the Europa League final, which they lost and then Mourinho won that one.
Yeah.
So he went to Juventus early. That was going to be his training schools, finishing schools. Learn from the very best, Chiellini and Bonucci.
Oh.
That was how you're going to turn into the best player ever, right? Under Allegri. Now it was Sarri actually when he was there, wasn't it? 22, yeah, Sarri.
Sarri, then Pirlo, then Allegri, yeah.
Well, this is relevant actually because the managers all changed. So Juventus, who won everything constantly in a row, all of a sudden start not doing that. Coincidentally, when De Ligt arrives, it's actually not that. But basically, he arrives, Chiellini gets injured, so suddenly, rather than learning from them, he's got to replace him. And because you're playing at that much higher level now, Serie A, every single mistake is pounced on and pushed, and the fans are quite intense.
And the Italians love defending.
Exactly. So you're not perfect, it's not great. And the things that De Ligt is good at is communication, leadership. Quite hard if you don't know the language. So again, a lot of your skill set is reduced slightly. New league, new country at 18, 19 years old is very difficult to deal with. Loads of mitigating factors, so why that wasn't maybe as much of a success. However, he played loads and loads of games for Juventus and was decent for them, decent enough that Bayern Munich then paid a lot of money for him. But then Bayern Munich again, a team who always won everything, Nagelsmann's manager, and all of a sudden after Nagelsmann, it just starts to crumble a little bit. So he's not had this stable platform to develop the way you think he maybe would and win things, but he has won those league titles. And for context, Virgil van Dijk, who'd maybe you'd pick as like the best defender, like the superstar, he was 24 when he joined Southampton. So like a similar development rate. So like De Ligt already has about like 18,000 minutes or something like that, and Van Dijk at the same age only had 11,000 played at this level. And there's other players like defenders like Saliba, who's 23, who's like now this big star. But Saliba has had more, I would say, of a stable base, less pressure on him to deal with, and less things to cope with outside of the actual on the pitch stuff. Whereas De Ligt had all the potential, has had the spotlight on him for a long time. He's played for Netherlands loads of times, 44 times I think. And Van Dijk quietly went Groningen, Celtic, Southampton, and then he was a superstar at like 26 years old. And centre-backs, when you think of the best centre-backs ever, what year do you remember them being? It's like 28 normally.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
Like Cannavaro, he was about 28, 29.
Yeah.
You think of another good defender. Name one defender.
You want me to name Rio Ferdinand?
And what age do you think of him when he was good?
Oh, 28.
There you go.
28, of course.
4 years to go.
How old's your dad in your head?
I think he's probably...
Do you know what I mean? My dad's 42, my mum's 37. It's weird, isn't it? You're very...
That is very weird.
Do you think that's young? Because they're not that age anymore. Now, very interesting. Do you agree about this with De Ligt? And also, what kind of player do you think he is? Because we mentioned Van Dijk there, and also we've talked a lot about centre-backs recently. I feel like today the expectation of a world great centre-back is maybe very different from even what it was in 2019 when we were talking about De Ligt rising to the stars.
Sure, I think maybe the more important question here for Manchester United is, can they find value here, right? That's what they'll be looking at in the market. We've got a player who hasn't lived up to his potential regardless of how you can explain it. And so, but Manchester United aren't buying a player that is going to cost the amount of money that kind of player would cost.
No.
So they're going to be paying much less. And we've already seen they've had interest in Jared Branthwaite, and they were probably priced out of that a little bit. There's going to be a much lower price on someone like Matthijs de Ligt. He is going to be obviously good enough to start for them. So I think the way that they'll be looking at this, they don't care necessarily about whether or not he's fulfilled his potential. They'll be thinking, here's a player who's undervalued in the market. He can come in and do a good job for us, and hopefully we'll get him back on that upward trajectory.
Yeah.
There's a reason he wasn't starting for Bayern every single week, and there's a reason that he's not starting for the Netherlands now.
Yeah.
And Ten Hag, having worked with him before, is probably really important.
Yeah, I also think that it's interesting that actually, having watched a bit of De Ligt in the last few days, he profiles very similarly for me to someone like Raphael Varane, who is Manchester United. He's basically the player that he would be replacing. So there's a sense as well in which Manchester United have looked at the dynamics in their squad and said, we're moving this player on, let's find a player who can replace him. Now, Varane, obviously a very good player, played for Real Madrid for many years. Similar sort of profile. Like, I don't think that De Ligt is going to be like a breakout quality star on the ball, but he's a good defender. He's a good ball carrier, and is going to be a reliable player. That's what Manchester United need. That they're not looking to necessarily jump straight to, here's the next player who's going to change the world of centre backs. They're just looking for someone who can replace an outgoing player and know that he can do a job. So in many respects, like, I think the reason why they're going for him is because, as we've said before, this is all about finding value. He'll be able to do what he's doing for the amount of money that they're going to be offering, but there's the potential that if they get him back on the right track, maybe he then will make those steps that JJ's talking about to get him back up to the level that people expected from him at the beginning of his career.
Well, from golden boy to boy of other precious metal, I don't know which one. You'll have to tell me, John. Archie Gray moved to Spurs this week from Leeds United for around £25 million, we think. Why were so many clubs willing to spend so much money on an 18-year-old, even if he is made of precious metals?
Well, yeah, he was very much a popular option for a lot of clubs. There was a possibility he could go to Brentford, but ended up going to Spurs. And yeah, a lot of clubs offering a lot of money for a player who has only just turned 18, spent most of the season, last season for Leeds, playing in the Championship at 17 and not looking out of place whatsoever, particularly in terms of his physical profile. And I think this is why so many teams are interested in him, because you watch him playing in the Championship, which is a very physical league anyway, and he looks physically developed in that league. He doesn't necessarily look stand out at this point in terms of physical development, but he was 17 years old and didn't look out of place.
Does he look like a man?
He doesn't look like a man. He does.
No,
he does look young,
doesn't.
but in terms of like when you look at his physical stature, he is a little bit taller, I would say, than the average height in that league, and he carries himself really well. So physical profile is really nice. That's the reason why clubs want him, because the idea is that if you have that physical profile now at the age of just 18, you've still got a few years of physical development to go. So the idea then is that by the time you hit 23, 24, as we're saying, he'll be a profile where he's actually stand out in those qualities. And that's something that we've seen from someone like Jude Bellingham, right? You were saying it before, 20 years old, but like his physical profile is impressive next to other people at the elite level. In terms of his technical profile, really nice player, very good on the ball, good with both feet, very press resistant, for example, a good ball carrier as well. He still has development in terms of, I think, ball striking stuff. So he's not going to be like an incredible passer of the ball at this point. But the idea will be that you would hope that that side of his game will develop. And then there's a few things in terms of the out of possession stuff, which again need to develop. But that's very much an experience thing, I think. So yeah, really nice physical profile with a lot of a ceiling in terms of the technical side of the game. So it's very unsurprising to me that a lot of these clubs are thinking, if we buy him now at 25, 30 million, we're going to have maybe £100 million midfielder on our hands in the next 5 years or so.
Well, indeed. I mean, where do you think he'll actually play, JJ?
Well, I think he's a midfielder. I think we kind of know that, although he did spend most of last season, I think almost all of it, as a right back for Leeds. Which means he has the potential to play inside the pitch and be like an inverted boy. Yeah. He could do that. I see him long term as being a 6.
Right.
At the moment, he's probably best as an 8 because he's still he's quick enough because he's young. As John said, he's really good with the ball. He can carry it. Doesn't maybe have the final ball just yet, but that can easily come. Could even play as a 10. I think when you're younger, you probably just like attacking more, so that's probably what it is. Yeah. But what you'll see from him a lot, in fact, on the exact note of John saying he's very press resistant, this is what I like about him. If you go on YouTube, any Archie Gray highlights reel, you'll see loads and loads of stuff where a player is trying to pressure him, or you maybe have two. He's got these lovely little double touches that just take the ball away and send one person one way and he moves into the space. He's really good at this sort of thing.
He wriggles free.
Yeah, it's like that stuff you see Busquets do quite a lot, or have done in the past. It's just a clever touch, clever turn, kind of stuff that's very hard to coach, but he's just got that innately. And so then if you have the physical profile and the technical ability to add to that sort of stuff, you've got a really good player.
Yeah.
His dad was a footballer and so was his granddad.
Really?
Yeah.
Who was his dad?
It was
Andy.
And
Andy
his granddad
Gray.
is Eddie Gray.
Andy Gray? What, the commentator?
No.
Andy Gray?
No.
Have I gone mental?
No, you haven't.
Not that
but
one.
It's quite a common name.
He is a
as
person.
The name Andy. So.
Yeah.
Well, Arsenal are also looking for a new goalkeeper, John. Backup and competition for David Raya, we assume. There's some interesting stuff in the deal sheet about this. You were interested in this, though, because it gives you an opportunity to settle a point, settle a score that you've been trying to get one over on Arteta for over a year now. And you're quite literally champing at the bit to get this one in,
right.
aren't you?
Yeah, that's
JJ and I didn't want
absolutely
to discuss it at all. You forced us to put it in. What is it that you think you've done so well?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happened. I'm glad you brought it up like that, Joe. But yeah, I think interesting because we were talking about goalkeepers in Arsenal last season. David Raya arrived on loan last season, and the argument was made that this wasn't a replacement for Aaron Ramsdale. Actually, what was going to happen was we were going to see a rotating set of keepers for Arsenal, so that you'd bring if one of them's better at playing long, then you're playing in a game where you're going to play long a lot. You play the goalkeeper who's better at playing long, and then the goalkeeper who's better at playing short, and the games you're going to play short.
It just seemed like over time that David Raya was better at all of the things and therefore playing in all the games.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of the two things. One of which was that probably Raya was always intended to be the starting goalkeeper, at least in the Premier League, and maybe a bit of scope for Ramsdale to play in the cups. But what we've seen is that Ramsdale really hasn't enjoyed that dynamic of being in that competition setting, and so has gradually sort of fallen out of favour, I'd say. And he obviously wants first team football. So Arsenal are now in a situation where they need to find a replacement for him. So we're looking at the young Espanyol goalkeeper as a backup.
You never believed it, did you? That's the point I'm trying to get to. It's just that no one can pull the wool over your eyes.
No, because there are teams who have used rotating goalkeepers before. Brighton, I think, are a good example of that. So they got Bart Brugger and Jason Steele, and they mix those two up. So it can be done. I guess I was just a little bit sceptical that it was going to work at a club like Arsenal. So I'm maybe a little bit less surprised.
No one can pull the wool over John's eyes, JJ. Not even when he worked in the wool factory. Yeah.
Why would they be pulling wool over his eyes there? If anything, that would hamper his ability to work.
It would, yeah.
That's just your idea of the North, isn't it? It's just like
from
lots
pulling
of
wool over.
factories.
Factories and everything. Here's an interesting one for you, JJ. Anthony Gordon. It transpires that Newcastle offered a proposal to Liverpool to sign Anthony Gordon. Newcastle, I think, are doing this in aid of trying to raise money to avoid breaking trying to avoid breaking PSR. They were prepared to offload Gordon. Liverpool were interested, but felt the valuation was a little excessive. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But it brings us on to an interesting point about Liverpool, who haven't really done any business yet. What do you make of that?
Well, the reason for that is meant to be that Arne Slot wants to be able to assess the entire squad that he's got and give everyone a fair chance and work. It's already a good squad. There's lots of players there. There's also a belief in Liverpool that lots of players underperformed last season, I should say. So players like Darwin Núñez, and maybe you can get Luis Diaz back to being a phenomenal player once more. So there's loads of place for development and potential to rise within that Liverpool squad already. A lot of people just want new shiny things, and they already have decent players. And they signed a whole new midfield last season. It takes time to bed this in. You'll see differences in how Slot's team play to how Klopp's did. Yeah. Gordon to Liverpool is interesting because he was a youth player for Liverpool, isn't he? He's a boyhood fan. That's definitely true.
He's a boyhood fan, yeah.
Yeah. So that's obviously a reason. But now his head seems to have turned. So it's one of these things you make a mistake in when you play Football Manager, when you offer players just to see how much money you could get for them, and then they're like, well, maybe I'll go then, and then you've ruined the player.
Like you pop a nice Viennetta in front of someone and then take it away. What do you think is going to happen? Dribbling, you know?
That's exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's also just like how Man City also haven't signed any players yet. Another team with a good squad, but I'd imagine surely they'll end up signing something.
What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've never really managed to replace Gundogan for whatever reason. They just haven't really brought in a profile that's fit there. They've obviously had a few misses in that kind of area of the pitch as well. So the Calvin Phillips deal obviously didn't work out for them. And Matthijs Nunes as well, who was brought in last summer, I don't think has been successful, and even maybe talk of him moving on as well. So there's definitely scope for them to bring in new players. They've been linked with Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle, but I think he has a release clause that's very high. And
sounds like they're unprepared to spend £100 million.
Yeah, basically. And as what we know from Man City is that they're not going to be sort of yanked around in the market. If there's a lot of clubs in for one player, for example, they'll often just walk away and say, this is going to move this player beyond our valuation, and we don't need to get this player, we have other players we can go for as well. So they'll be doing smart stuff behind the scenes. I'd be amazed if they didn't bring someone in. They've got, within that area as well, it's not just that they've not managed to replace players, but they've also got a couple of players who could well be going. Kevin De Bruyne has been linked with moves away, as has Bernardo Silva for the last few seasons.
Yeah.
And Kevin De Bruyne is coming off the back of 2 hamstring surgeries, which, I think as soon as you're in your 30s and you're having hamstring surgeries, like, it's going to affect your ability to play at the highest level. So I wouldn't be surprised if they brought someone in, but they have no rush. Like the Euros is on right now, the Copa America is on right now. They'll be assessing their options and they'll bring someone in at some point, but only when it's ready for them.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.